drawing. 1-800-962-9862.
Thanks so much to Panera Bread for making that drawing possible. You can get entered right now. You can either make that call or go online to WUNC.org. We're asking for your support today because listener support is the single largest, most important source of funding for WUNC. And it does take $7.9 million to operate WUNC for 1 year. To this fund drive, we're trying to raise $600,000 of that, and we're $145,000 left towards that goal. That's a lot of money to raise, but we can get there one call at a time.
1-800-962-9862. Thanks and good luck.
This is the State of Things from the American Tobacco Historic District. I'm Frank Stasio. You know, one of the many great things about living here in North Carolina is the way they make it easy for you to vote. Early and one-stop voting encourage greater participation, which in turn strengthens the democratic process. But of course, integrity is also important. There have to be safeguards to protect against fraud. True the Vote is a movement that has sprung up as a self-appointed guardian of electoral integrity. Though the movement is controversial, critics charge the movement is just a cover for a larger effort to suppress minority voting. Well, joining us now is Christian Adams, and he's an election attorney with True the Vote. Christian Adams, welcome to the program. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Frank.
What is the extent of voter fraud nationally here in North Carolina? How much is there?
Well, it's hard to know because folks in academia don't seem to want to really quantify it. Efforts to do so by groups like the Brennan Center have been flawed. They leave a lot of voter fraud out of the reports. So we really don't know how much voter fraud is out there, but we know that it's a problem in many places, and some people want to do something about it.
You know, I'm looking at a report here that's just out. It's funded by the Carnegie Corporation and the Knight Foundation, and it took a look at voter fraud, comprehensive look back to 2000. It says that in-person voter impersonation on Election Day, there were 10 cases out of 146 million voters. That is 1 in 15 million. So according to this comprehensive report by Carnegie Knight, it's vanishingly small.
Well, the problem is that comprehensive report really isn't so comprehensive. It was done by News 21, and they actually left some cases out of voter impersonation that I actually litigated in federal court for the United States Department of Justice. So I know for a fact that there's missing instances in that report.
Now, this project also says that there's more fraud in absentee ballots, and voter registration than any other category. So they've got 491 cases of absentee ballot fraud, 400 cases of registration fraud. A required photo ID at the polls would not have prevented those cases. So photo ID doesn't prevent the cases where there's a far greater instance, although still relatively small, than in voting at the polls.
Well, photo ID does help prosecute in-person voter fraud at the polls because you can lock down the identity of the person doing it. The defendant can't say, well, that wasn't me, that was somebody else. So it shows up in a lot of different ways to help. You're right. Absentee ballot fraud is a huge problem in this country. And anytime you make a proposal to do something about it, as they've done in Kansas, you have the same usual suspects who oppose any changes to absentee ballot voting. So there's just a general tension between one side that believes in election integrity and the other side, and they're in a permanent state of tug-of-war.
So we've got this report that I'm looking at that was pretty well funded and fairly comprehensive. You may have left out a couple cases, but voter ID would have caught those 10 people since 2000. Once again, where's your data? Why do you think it's so pervasive if you say you can't nail it down?
Well, what's pervasive? I mean, how many instances of voter fraud equals pervasive? No one can ever answer that question. When they do, it's usually a number that is awfully high, and I would ask the question, how much voter fraud is okay? Do we accept 1 unit of corruption, 2 units, 50, 100? I don't think it's good to have any voter fraud, and we should applaud people who are doing something about it, not criticize them.
Yeah, no, you're right, and you don't want any at all. You've got 10 cases in 146 million, and then it says that, so then the question becomes, what is the appropriate approach to stop those 10 out of 146 million? This report finds photo ID laws and other new voting restrictions disproportionately affect minorities, students, the disabled, and the elderly. Do you think we should find different approaches? That this one clearly is one that suppresses voting among the most vulnerable in our population.
Well, just about no court has ever agreed with that conclusion, whether it's in Pennsylvania, Indiana, the United States Supreme Court, the Billups v. Georgia, case after case after case has disagreed with that conclusion that there's any discriminatory effect. Voter ID should be free, easy to get, and readily available. If you do that, the arguments against it are pretty doggone weak.
One of the complaints that critics raise is that this is by and large a movement that is funded by, supported by, and the impetus behind it is from conservatives. Donna Yowell is the state director for True the Vote in North Carolina. She has said it's time to wake up, get out and work for your conservative views. November is just around the corner. We have to take back Congress or socialism will be in full force. She's headed True the Vote in North Carolina. Does that disturb you?
Well, look, I'm not going to criticize conservatives because they happen to be the only people right now that seem to care about voter fraud in North Carolina. But take a look at Harold Metz, senator from Rhode Island, an African-American sponsor of the voter ID bill, a Democrat in Rhode Island, which passed both Democrat houses in Rhode Island and became the law. Look at Arthur Davis, former Democrat member of the Congressional Black Caucus in Congress, is now a big supporter of voter ID because he has seen the fraud firsthand and how it corrupts particularly minority voting districts. And so the tide is turning on this. Actually, the tide never was bad because 80% of Americans support voter ID. And it's bipartisan, it's cross-racial, and a majority of African Americans support it, a majority of Hispanics, women, Democrats support it in majority numbers, so do Republicans. It's only a very tiny fringe that stands against voter integrity efforts like voter ID.
You know, when we talk about voter ID, that is, again, the numbers that have been documented seem to be relatively small relative to absentee and voter registration. So I want to get your opinion on that because, you know, we've got Acorn in 2008 supporting the Democrats. Now we've got this guy, Nathan Spruill, who got $3 million from the Republicans. He's neck deep in allegations. In fact, the RNC had to fire him because of voter registration fraud allegations for the Republican. What do we do about that? How do we address absentee ballot and registration fraud, which seem to be, by and large, the larger problems?
Well, there's a couple tools to do that, and that's what the group in North Carolina and the True the Vote nationally is trying to do. One of them is Section 8 of Motor Voter. Section 8 of Motor Voter empowers people to bring cases, federal court cases, to require the voter rolls to be cleaned up. In short of suing people, if you don't want to go to court, you alert election officials about particular problems on the rolls, and that's exactly what the groups in North Carolina are doing. Look, you have counties in North Carolina with more people registered to vote than you have people alive, according to the Election Assistance Commission data that was released after the 2010 election. And so there's a problem nationwide. We have over 160 counties, some states, with more people on the voter rolls than people alive. And nobody should criticize good volunteer citizens who want to go out, examine those voter rolls, and bring to the attention of election officials where the problems might be. That's something that we should all applaud. That's not something we should demonize and spy on.
Forgive me, that's not something we do on election day, right at the polls. You wait.
That's right.
After the fact.
You do it ahead of time. Yeah. You do it well in advance of the election. Federal law doesn't allow you to remove people who are inactive just because they're inactive right before the election. But if they're dead, you can remove them up until November 5th.
Christian Adams, so good to talk with you. Thank you for joining us.
Very good.
Christian Adams, an election attorney with True the Vote. We'll continue our conversation on voting in North Carolina on the State of Things from North Carolina Public Radio, a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Please stay with us.